Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Chris Radicone from JMT Consulting. So glad that you guys, everyone is here and joining us this morning. Just want to make sure we are recording. We are, okay. I just want to make sure that we are recording this demo because at the end, everyone will get a copy as well as the slide deck that Linda will be presenting. So hope everyone is excited to learn let's kick it off. So again, my name is Chris Radicone and I'm the client account manager for all of the organizations here at JMT that utilize Intacct. Today we have two very special presenters. We have Linda Pinion and Gary Burnett from Sage Intacct, and they're going to be walking us through Intacct's new interactive custom report writer. So we want to thank them for joining us this morning, and we are very excited to have them walk us through this awesome new add-on to Intacct. So the new interactive custom report writer, which is a part of November's Q4 release, is a modern visual reporting tool built to increase the flexibility and agility required to improve your organization's day-to-day operations. Today's our webinar is going to be twofold. First, we're going to have Linda Pinion. She's going to guide us through the tool's functionality at a high level. And then Gary's going to take us, Gary Burnett, he's going to take us through the nuts and bolts of the product. So again, very excited to have them both here. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Gary. Then finally, once Gary has walked us through the product, Linda will then go through a couple of frequently asked questions, and then we're going to open it up for a couple of questions with a Q&A. So, and if we don't get to your question today, please still, you can always reach out to myself, and I will be sure to answer it as soon as possible. And I just want to remind everybody that, again, there is a promotion going on for the interactive custom report writer, which is an additional 20% off for the month of June. So that's some exciting stuff. So I also want to let you know, again, you will be getting the slides as well as this recorded webinar. So it looks like we have about a pretty full house here. Looks like we have about 33 attendees. We want to ensure we have enough time to take questions. So again, JMT and Sage Intacct, we're super grateful that you took the time to join us today. So everybody, let's dive in. I'm going to turn it over to Linda. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Just want to make sure, Chris, that you can hear me okay and you can see my screen.
Yep, we are good to go.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, again, just a great way for us to connect with some of the JMT folks. JMT has been a long time, very successful partner of Sage Intacct, and happy to be here today with all of you. Two people are going to be with you today, myself, and a lot of you I probably know, and you know me. I have a colleague on the phone with me, Gary Burnett. He's going to be doing the presentation of the solution within the software. So both of us work in the solution consulting area at Sage Intacct. So let me give you a quick rundown. Here's what we're going to do, exactly what Chris said. We're going to do a quick introduction by way of PowerPoint, just to lay out that visual of what the interactive report writer is, what makes up this new tool. Then we're going to look at the demo with Gary, and then we're going to follow up with some frequently asked questions, things that other people have been asking. So we just did an FAQ on it, and then we'll do some open discussion. So the first thing you should know about the interactive custom report writer, it has a great acronym, ICRW. So when you see that, you know that's Interactive Custom Report Writer. For those of you who have been using Sage Intacct, you know that we already have a custom report writer. This one is different. It's interactive. It's a new reporting tool. And it's really different in that it's what we would refer to as a WYSIWYG. And you may not be familiar with that term. It's kind of fun to say a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And what that means to you is that as you are developing and putting this report together, you'll be able to see what the end result's going to look like while you're creating. Now, there's obviously a reason why we're moving and offering this interactive custom report writer, and that's because it has some added and advanced capabilities over what we have currently in the solution. Things that you're going to see today, and I'm going to go into some of that detail as well, is having the ability to do pivot tables and to filter data differently than what you can today. Being able to open this up as a blank canvas, if you will, and drag and drop columns and fields. Again, being able to see that live preview as you're developing. When you start thinking about those columns on the report, being able to group them together and subtotal and have more complex calculations within those columns. And then, of course, being able to export this. So we don't want to take away the different ways that you can deploy something, being able to push it out into PDF, Excel, into PowerPoint. So when we think about the power of the tool, and then when you look at the left side of the screen, you see when we open this tool up, we're going to have this blank canvas, and then we're going to start building and dragging and dropping those headers, those fields over to create those columns. So again, you'll be able to see it as you build it, drag and drop, having those calculations, the pivot tables, the exporting, and the fact that you can add this to menus and dashboards. When you look at the different ways that you can manage those columns, so you're going to have some choices as to how you want that column to look, maybe some rules around, in this case, we've got a column where we're pointing to and we're saying, we want to look at members where the total paid is greater than or less than, or where transaction amounts are equal to. So now we have the ability to put some rules around those column filters. And again, some of these slides, when you get the deck, you'll notice that they're build slides. So again, just pointing out what the slide is telling you and what the end result will look like. So based on the rules and the criteria that I applied to this column filter, I've asked it to show me the top 5 unpaid invoices. So this is a report that you can place rules in those columns, in those filtering columns, and be able to get a report out that looks like what you see at the bottom of the screen. So another feature is being able to prompt for user input. So you know today when you execute reports, a lot of times you're prompting for things as part of your criteria before the report is executed. So you'll notice here that we are prompting, so we've set up a prompt that says, select the value of the customers that you want to see. And we've asked for first alerts and second wave. And so now what we see is a report that has those 2 customers and the detail of the transactions for just those 2 customers. So adding that column prompt. The next one is a calculation column. So this one, we created a report based on a calculation that we said. So in the middle section there where it says date fully paid and then due date. So we gave it the logic that says, go get an AP bill and look at when it was paid and then subtract that based on when it was due. And then when you look over at the right-hand side and you see the outcome of that, you notice that there is a column at the end that has calculated and been created to show days to pay. So again, taking the data that's there, we know when it was paid, we know when it was due, and then making that calculation and creating the column and pushing that out to a report. And then another more advanced way to do some calculations is to use what we call Boolean logic. So that's where you can put in if, then, else statements. So now what we've done is we've said, you know, if the payment type is equal to credit card, then put the description of the credit card. Otherwise, or else, put the bank account and show me the bank name. So now we have an output of that where we're seeing American Express as the credit card, and we're seeing Sterling Bank and Wells County Bank as the bank names. So again, being able to use more advanced logic, more advanced rules in these calculations. And then one other piece that, we've all done this, we do this every day within our dashboards, within our reports. We want to be able to drill down. We want to get to that source transaction. So here on this report, you can see that this is hyperlinked right to that sales invoice. So now we have that drill down capability to the source transaction. So the report being generated and created with the interactive custom report writer, and it being hyperlinked over to drill down to the sales invoice. And then here's the biggie that everyone pretty much in the world knows Excel and is using Excel for lots of different things. But one of the things that they want to do, and we've not been able to do it, is pivot tables. So here what you see is a report that's pulling, as you can see, it's pulling dimensional information. So we're pulling customers, we're pulling departments, and we're pulling locations. And then as we build this out, we're able to expand that over time across those time periods and to see a total of all of the invoice amounts for that period. Oops, pardon me. And be able to take this and drill in to 2015 to the point that we could drill into 2015, we could drill into the first quarter, we could drill into the month, we could drill into the actual day. So as Gary shows you today, some of the capabilities, being able to create pivot tables and have this slicing and dicing of the data and flipping of the data is something that everyone has wanted to do for a long time, and we've not had that capability. So I'm going to go ahead and remind you of two things. One, if you have questions, you might want to jot those down, maybe post those in the chat box. We're going to take questions at the end. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Sam to transfer controls to Gary. So I'm going to relinquish controls and let Gary fire up the custom report writer, and let's take a look at it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Linda. I think we're switching over to Gary now. I just want to also remind everybody, this is Chris again, to please submit, I know Linda just said it, but please submit your questions to that little side panel, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So as we take a look at this, one of the things that I will remind people, and this is one of the questions that a lot of folks ask, is, does this mean, now that we have a custom report writer, that the old custom report writer is going to go away? And the answer is no, it's not. So the custom report writer is staying. The interactive custom report writer is a separate SKU, as I'm sure everyone on the phone knows. It's a separate SKU, and it is something that was released last year.
Okay, so can you guys see my screen?
We cannot.
Oh,
I can see the screen.
I can see it on my end.
Okay. I don't see it on my end, so just let's make sure that our audience can see it. So get someone from the audience to confirm that they can see it.
Yep.
We have confirmed that our audience can see it.
Okay, all right, that's perfect.
Cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, so so thanks. So a couple things I wanted to do as part of the presentation is I'll start with the end in mind. So we'll take a look at a couple of reports that were built with the interactive custom report writer, and then go back and I'll build one from scratch to give you an idea of some of the features and capabilities that Linda was referring to. The ability to drag and drop, the ability to see as you're building your report, and how easy it is to create calculations and create sorting and subtotaling and do some of the prompting that you'll see on these reports. The first report that I'll start with is one that helps demonstrate two things. One, it demonstrates the ability to have multiple sets of data on the screen and have those two pieces of data linked together. So on the left-hand side, I have summary data, and on the right-hand side, I have detailed data. And as I click on these, I'll see the difference between the two. So these two are tied together. When I click on the name, you'll see the right-hand side changing. So this capability of linking reports together is a great feature. You also see that Linda talked about drill down. So here I have drill down capability to where I can drill back into the detail. So I've identified two drill downs here. One, I'm drilling back to the customer record. So now I'm drilling into the customer information. And then on the right-hand side, you see where the invoices are highlighted. So if I come here, I could drill into one of these invoices. So that capability of drilling back to that detail information is part of the capability built into the reporting capabilities. A couple things that I want to talk about here is now you see I've got a logo at the top, I've got page numbers, run date and time. So lots of different formatting we can do. And the other thing that you see up here is I can process, store, email, add to a dashboard, or memorize. And Linda had pointed this out as well, that when we're building these reports, the users can run these reports from a menu, can run them from a dashboard. And I'll give you a couple examples of where I've embedded some reporting onto menus and dashboards at the end if we have time. So let's back up and see how this report was constructed. So if I look at this report in the report writer, I see this layout where I have a pivot table on the left-hand side. I have the detail table on the right-hand side. I have that header information at the top where I put the page number and logo. Over here in this reporting area, this is all the information that I can drag and drop onto the report. So let's say as an example, I wanted some other information. So when I open up the report here, it's going to start giving me those individual detailed tables within Intacct. So I can go through and pick out another field that I want to put on this report. Let's say that I want some information like territory. So I want that customer's territory on this report. So I can easily just take that field and drag and drop it in, or the ID of that territory. So let's just say, let's drag the territory over here. So now it's the beginning. So now that quickly, it's added that territory to my report. So if I wanted to subtotal or total by that column, I could just easily right click on that column and tell the system to subtotal that field, or to create row calculations or row grand totals or column totals. So that easy, I could have the system create totals for me. If I want to change the name of the field, the heading that I see here, I can easily do that as well. So instead of having an ID, like I have here where the names have been changed and the colors have been changed, I can easily format that on the report. So you have that capability to where those fields within Intacct are exposed. The linkages have already been created for you. So I'm looking at AR invoice detail. So all those components that can tie into an invoice. And if you think about an AR invoice, an AP bill, lots of transactions within Intacct have header and detail information. So when these reporting areas are set up, they're set up to start at the detail level and then work their way to the related objects. So in this case, that header information would be at the invoice side. And so that, those are how most of those objects are set up, where they go from detail to summary, or from many to one, which is typical for most report writers. So if you're familiar with any other types of reporting tools like Crystal Reports or Cognos or ClickTech or any other BI tools, those reporting areas are usually set up like that. Within these reporting areas, those attributes of the individual fields, the dimensions. So if you have custom dimensions or you have changed the names of the dimensions in your environment, they'll appear here with whatever names you've changed them to. So you'll have access to not only any custom fields, but user-defined dimensions or terminology changes to your dimensions will show here as well. So let's take a look at some other reports. So let's come off, I'll get off of this report for a second, and let's look at the report writer at a different level. One of the reports Linda showed was this pivot table, and the beauty of these pivot tables is the ability to change what's on the X and Y axis, and it changes the look and feel of the report completely. It's only changing the report at runtime. It's not changing the definition of the report. So when you create your report, you can give users rights to include fields that were hidden, or have the ability to change how this report looks. So this report is a pivot table of my invoices showing me the customer, showing me the individual locations, the sales department or admin department, and then it's giving me the total amount. So it's aggregating these amounts over the period of time that I ran. So if I want to expand one of these, so let's say that we want to see these numbers expanded for New York sales. When I click on this, it's going to expand it into the year. Whoop, I just had it. Hold on a second. And then, as Linda was showing in her little slide deck, if I click on that year, it's going to then expand it out to the quarter, to the month, down to the individual days. So the user can easily, expand or contract depending on what area of information that they want to see. So that gives us a great capability to show summary numbers or show detail numbers without having to run multiple reports. But let's say I want to change how this report looks. I want to basically have the user prompt or look at the locations differently. So just by dragging location to the top as a prompt, now I'm going to go through and sort through each one of these individually. So each one of these now becomes a report in their own. And I just did that by taking and dragging the location from down here in the report up to the top. I could do the same thing with this department. Let's say that I want it to section. So I want the report to break every time those departments change. So now it's showing me the admin department and the totals for those, and showing me the sales department and then the total for those. Linda also mentioned that you have that capability of exporting to PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, but you also have the ability to export to a CSV, tab, or XML. And again, these reports can be easily added to a dashboard, memorized, and added to a menu, so users don't have to come in the interactive report writer to execute these. They could execute them from a dashboard or from a menu in Intacct. So that capability of this drag and drop is easily done. So I just took and dragged those columns, and then if I wanted to put it back, I would just back up or just drag it back down into the document where I wanted it to be. So let's take a look at the building one from scratch and what does that look like. One of the things that I'd like to talk a little bit about is some of these calculations that Linda was referring to are easily done. So I can do simple calculations, I could do if then else calculations, or I could do some pretty complex calculations. So in this report, I'm looking at item profitability year over year, and I'm asking the system to tell me the sales, the cost of goods sold, but I'm going to calculate the margin and the margin percentage. And I'm looking at my certain revenue accounts. So I have 3 different revenue accounts in my demo system, and I'm looking at what items are being sold within those areas. So the calculation here is this margin. So I'm pulling out the sales and cost of goods sold, and I'm coming up with the margin. So that calculation is created in the system, and I'll show you quickly how I created one. But let's look at the calculation first, and then we'll go back and see how it got added into the system. So part of that is here, this calculation. So we'll look at the formula. And this is similar to what Linda was showing in hers, where we were subtracting 2 columns. So I'm basically subtracting the dollar amount that's in credit from the cost. And the way that I was doing this is I just selected the columns. I just said, take the credit amount and subtract it from the cost to come up with this field I'm calling margin. And then the margin percentage, if I look at that calculation, it's no more than taking that amount and then dividing those 2, right? So it's dividing that credit amount by the cost and then multiplying it by 100. So quickly we can do those types of calculations in the system to get additional columns that we need for our reporting. And then on those, the system sees those, so I can easily subtotal or total those. Over here, you see some conditional highlighting. So I've said if a margin percent gets to a certain place, I want you to highlight that. So similar to what we do in the financial report writer, where we're showing some conditional highlighting, I can set those kind of rules on fields or in my report. So if I take a look at that conditional highlighting for a second, so let's look at that field and how that conditional highlighting happened. So that was on our margin percentage. So over here, I'm going to look at that margin percent field. And we're going to look at the properties of that field. So here under conditional formatting, I've got a rule that says, you know, if that field is less than 27%, I want that value to be this yellow. So if we add a condition here, so let's add a condition and say if the margin percentage is greater than 30, right, then or it could be a presentation value. So we're going to say if it's greater than 30, we want the color to be this blue color. So I can have multiple conditions here as I'm going through the system. So you have that capability as well to make those conditional changes on fields. So now you can see that all those that are greater than 30 are that blue. So this is part of the WYSIWYG, and I'm going to build one from scratch so that you see what's going on. So when I'm building these reports, I'm seeing the data real time. It's reading my data real time. And then if I created some user prompts, I want to prompt the user for certain things. So this first prompt that I have is date. So on this date prompt, let's take a look at it so you can see what it's asking. So I'm saying, you know, when the transaction was created, I want the dates between a certain time on the calendar. And I can make it to where it's required, and then I can put in some specific values so it doesn't start off blank. So when the user's prompted, it'll give them a date range, and then they're forced to put something in, but there will automatically be some dates in place. So these are similar to any of the prompts that you have on current reports and filtering you have on current reports within Intacct, but you're actually building these prompts yourself. So let's say I want to add a prompt here. So let's add one. So we're going to say when the, let's go say when territory ID, and let's change that name. So we don't want that customer at the end of it. So let's take that off. We want it to be equal to, and we want it to be a check or a choice box. So let's say it's a choice list. And we want to be able to say include all columns, and we want people to select multiple values, and we don't want them to type in the value. So let's start there. So now if I looked at this, so let's run this in preview mode real quickly. I can see my dates are hard coded, and I can use the calendar to look at the dates and enter the dates myself. And then the territory is going to have a drop down list. So I could say all values, or I could just say I just want stuff in Central and West. So when I click OK now, it's going to look for those transactions that fall into that prompting area specifically. So it's that easy to help filter and control the data and to move the data within a time frame. And since I only asked for 1 year, I only see 1 year here, but if we go back and we run that report again, and let's change our time frame from just 18 to cover 17 through 19. So at this point, I didn't ask it to stop on the territory because territory wasn't mandatory. But now I can see that my years, but this report was set up to be a pivot table. So if I wanted to drag and drop again, the X and Y axis, I'll drag year up here to the top. And now you'll see the report change where sales, cost of goods sold, margin is all grouped by year. And if I just drag it up a little higher, either into sections or prompts, again, now I'm looking at just that information for 2017, 18, or 19. So it adds a lot of power and flexibility and capability.
So Gary, this is Linda. I want to ask you a question. You've been moving through this relatively quickly. One thing that I've noticed is everything that you've gone to do has been in English. So speak for a moment about, what kinds of folks would be using this tool, and do they need to be a programming type person in order to use the report writer?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the reporting tool is a lot more capable than just our custom report writer, in that, the custom report writer just lets you click on some fields and drag and drop. So here you have to know a little more about the data model, a little bit more about where the data resides. And I'll show that when I create a report from scratch. So if you're familiar with any other reporting tools like Crystal, like if you're doing anything in Excel where you're creating formulas or calculations or lookups, that'll be the equivalent of what some of the stuff you're doing here when you're building pivot tables and you're doing calculations within this product. So let's add a report from scratch, because then it helps to bring some of this home. So let's say that I want to do revenue trending. So I'll just say revenue trends is the name of my report. And then the reporting areas are all the different places of data that we've created for you in advance. So this list of areas are all the areas that are within Intacct that we have built today, and we're still building more. So we haven't completely exhausted all the areas within Intacct that we can get data from or use data from today. But it's pretty comprehensive what we're covering. So you can see all the AP stuff, the banking and cash management, contract information, costing, employee, general ledger, inventory, order management, purchasing, and then some project stuff here at the bottom. So let's say that we want some of that revenue stuff, and we're going to pull it out of general ledger. So I'm going to select this general ledger object, and I'm going to pull data from there. So when I go to create this report, I'll override it. When I go to create this report, it's going to bring up a blank canvas for me to work on. And it's going to have this information to the right hand or the left hand side, which are all the fields that I can get into. So I'm going to open up this folder, and I'm going to say what I want to do is I want to build a report that tells me some of my revenue, but I'm going to start with by some of my dimensions. And this is a good example where my dimensions, we've repurposed the class dimension and we're calling it channel. So that's my sales channel. So I'm going to open up sales channel, and I want that name. So I can either drag or drop, or I can just double click on that field. I just double clicked. So I want to know by channel. I want to know by location. So I'll come down and pick up the location name. And as you see, as I'm clicking, it's going to start building all this on the right-hand side of the report. So I want to know by channel, by location, and I want to know by item. So let's pick up that item. And I want to know by the individual item number. So let's put the item number on here. So there's the item number. Then the other piece of data that I want is I want to know by the GL account. So I'm only going to focus on my revenue accounts. So what I'm going to pick up out of here now is, since I'm in general ledger, I'm going to pick up the account number. And I'm going to pick up the account title just so that we can see which accounts that we're looking at. Because I'm going to filter out the data. I only want my revenue accounts. So in my demo world, my revenue accounts start with the 4,000 or 40,000 series. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of all these other accounts on my report. So I'm going to come back to this Define tab, and I'm going to filter. So I'm going to create a filter that says, only show me the account numbers when they begin with the number 4. So now when I come back to refine, this is where I'll see all those other accounts disappear and only my revenue accounts appear now. So that quickly, I cut the noise off the report of things I didn't want to see. So I want a couple more things on this report. So I want the cost for those items. And I also want that transaction amount. So that transaction amount is the debit or the credit. So in our case, it's going to be a credit for revenue, but I'm going to see that dollar figure here as resolving as a positive number. So part of that information that we're looking at now I'm not seeing all of my reports. So I need to widen it so I can see the rest of it. So I'm just going to change the width of the report on my screen. So this quickly here, I can see this information. So I haven't done any calculations. I haven't done any totaling yet, but we're going to. So we're going to come through. And the other thing is I'm getting some erroneous stuff because I'm getting data without an item number. So again, I'm going to create a filter to get rid of that information too, by quickly saying, you know, when the item number is not null. So I'll just get the actual data. So here, if I want to subtract these two from each other, I want to be able to make sure I'm subtracting a positive from a positive. So I can either come in and say, give me the credit amount or the debit, whichever way those accounts are. So in this case, since it's the credit amount, then I'll take this field and I'll get rid of it. So I'll just take that field and tell it to exclude it from the screen or from the report. So now I can take these columns and drag them around and put them in the order I want them to be. I can manage the data from that aspect. The other thing that I probably want on here is I probably want the date when these transactions were posted, because the date usually becomes, you know, something important. So here you can see document ID. So you can see lots of different information. You know, a lot of this data is what gets plugged into every transaction that goes in the system. So when we're looking at these individual areas, you have lots of capabilities to get to lots of data that you have in your system. So here, if I look at the entry side of it, this is where my data will be. So here, again, I can look at that transactional information and I can say, you know, what information, when it was created, who it was created by, and on what date was it created. So I'll put entry date here and let's drag it back over here so we have that information up here close. All right, so I'm going to save this because at this point right now, I like what I see, but I want to do a couple of things real quickly to show you some of the ease and use of the product. So I want to be able to subtotal and grand total. So if I just click on the column and tell it to add a subtotal after the values, and let's subtotal by location as well. And then I also want a grand total. So I'll grand total at the very bottom. So now if I roll down a little bit, I'll start seeing when it switches from Boston to another location that my subtotals, I got a subtotal by Boston here, and then Dallas will be the next subtotal. So let's trim the data down so we're not scrolling through so much data. So let's create a prompt. So when we're building our reports, these reports are reading all the data. So if I'm trying to trim down the amount of data or trim or weed out some of the data, I can do that easily by hard coding a filter or creating prompts. So on our screen here, we said, you know, we wanted to know the locations and the channels. So let's get rid of, let's say that we only want just the Boston that we're looking at so far on our report. So that'll get rid of a bunch of the scrolling. So now I'm only looking at that detail. I want to change these amounts into dollar figures. So I want to change how these amounts look on the report. So I can easily go through. If I include or exclude columns and move those, and we're going to do that in a minute when we build the report at the end, I can move them left or right here, or I can move them up like I was dragging during the report build. I could drag those up to the top to be a prompt on the report. So when I'm looking at these individual columns themselves, I can change the heading, the colors of the heading. This is how I was on my other reports, how I had different column names and different colors on those. So if I come in here, let's just go change the cost and the dollar amount here. So let's change this field so you can get an idea. So on the column heading, let's switch that background color to green. I'm going to format the column and I'm going to change the name of the column and we're just going to call it amount. And then I'm also going to change how the data looks. So I'm going to override the data and I want it to be a currency amount and I want the dollar symbol and I'll round to from 2 decimal places to no decimals and I'll have the 1,000 separator in there. So quickly here, now you see that column got switched. And let's fix that because I did the data, not the heading. Let me fix that real quick. So I want the column heading to be green, not the data. Okay. So we can easily do that to do formatting on those fields. So the other thing that I can do when I'm dragging and dropping this information around, if I was going to create the calculation where I'm subtracting the amount from the cost to come up with the margin, I can create a calculation here. So let's do that real quick. So up here at the top, I have calculated columns, and then we'll just call it margin. So now we'll pick the fields that we wanted to work with. So here I'm going to say I want the amount, I want to subtract it, and the margin, or the cost, sorry, to come up with the margin. So when I subtract those two fields, I'll end up with that is my margin. And I'll add that column to the report, and then I can drag and put it wherever I want it on the report. So let's move ID back over here. So easily I can drag and drop and move things on the report. So now at this point, I've got a report and I'm still working on it, but I want to add some prompts. So I want to prompt for a couple things. One, I want to prompt for the date. So I'll say I want the entry date, so the column property of entry date. Oh, sorry. My mouse is not working. Hello, McFly. There it goes. So I want the date, so we'll change that name. So we'll change it just to date. Or date range, we'll call it date range. And we want it between, and we want to make sure that it's required input. And then we can set, something as a default like I did before. And we also want the user to be prompted for channel. So we'll pick up the channel itself and say, when the channel is a certain range of documents. So let's just change that name to just channel. So you have full control over, regardless of what we call it in the system, you can make those adjustments here. And let's say we want to include all values. And let's save that. So I can test the report here without having to run it. So I can then put in some data here to see how the report's going to execute. And part of that WYSIWYG is I see the data without the prompting. And then when I run it here in preview mode, I can see the data based on the selections I've made. So let's choose those three. And now I see that information that quickly. So when the users don't have to go through this, this is just the report building. So I can create these reports. So now this report I called revenue trends. So that report, I can give users permissions to it. I can allow users to have it on their dashboards or to execute those reports. So let's pick the report up and let's run that report as if the user would run it from a dashboard or a menu. So when they run the report, it's going to look like this. It's going to come up and ask them dates. And it's going to ask them to select the channel. And then here I can pick the values, or one or two values, or all the values. So when they view that report, that's what they'll see. And then if I gave them the ability to drag and drop and move columns, they could do that as well. So that's something when you're building the reports, you can give them that capability to move things around, or to drag and drop, or to manage that kind of data. The last thing I'll leave you with is some of the reports that we've been building are been, help show the power of it is doing things where we're showing month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter types of trending. So this report's a good example of that, where we're showing history of sales by product, by channel, by item, and then showing with individual months and what those are, and then showing some conditional highlighting. So there's quite a bit of capability built into the report writer that allows for not only this drag and drop and WYSIWYG, but creating calculations where I'm looking at things for certain months, for certain quarters, or for certain years to help do year-over-year trend analysis or month-over-month, quarter-over-quarter, and doing calculations in between to see that type of information. The other thing that I'll point out here is you should be able to see how fast this is running. So as it's running over, it's doing all that work behind the scenes. So when you're building pivot tables and you're doing that type of information and you're working on those reports, depending on how much data that you're asking for and at what level, it's aggregating or drilling down to the lower levels as fast as possible, because the report writer is tuned and built specifically to execute as efficiently as it can across the data set that we have behind the scenes. So I'm going to stop there for a second, Linda, and I think we're going to switch back to you.
So Gary's going to drive a few slides for me while I cover some frequently asked questions. Great demonstration of, here's some of the capabilities. Here's kind of the baseline data about the report writer. Then we moved right into looking at a couple of reports that Gary had already created and showing the power of being able to take those columns and make changes and have more advanced calculations. Then he showed us a pivot table, and that's something that everyone gets excited about, because now we're really able to take that data and slice and dice it very quickly. And most people are used to doing this already, so it's something that they have really wanted to have in the solution. And then the last piece, I believe, was really powerful, because although he was moving fast because he's familiar with the data and with the tool, what he was showing you was that everything is in English. So when you think about creating reports, many times people are a little intimidated because they feel like they need to have a programming skill. And with the interactive custom report writer, it's not designed that way. It is designed for a business user. And when you talk to your JMT representative, you can talk about, there's a couple of different flavors of whether you're someone who's going to build these reports or you're someone that's going to view these reports. So you need to talk about what that difference is. But the end of the day is this is going to give you the power to really get in and take your reporting to another level. So what I want to cover now quickly is some frequently asked questions, ones that have already come about that you may already be thinking about asking. So Gary, if you'll go to the next one. Great. So how do you get access? Again, you need to talk to JMT, talk to your account manager for the details. However, there are some different flavors. So whether you have full capabilities of the new report writer, or you have what we call a run only. So this is a different option. So you want to investigate that. Will the current custom report writer be available? And I believe I've already told you this, but I'll re-say it for you. Yes, it is still available. You can still use it. So that custom report writer and the financial report writer are still in play. You still should use those. They're part of our core solution. Is it easy to implement? Yes, it is easy to implement. There are training sessions, there are videos, recorded assets, and no implementation costs are required. Can I make a copy of a standard report and then add fields and filters? So currently, if you have a standard report that you're using out of the system, you don't have access to that format. However, you could replicate many of those reports using the interactive custom report writer. And that's something that you really could not do with the custom report writer. So there's a difference there. Next slide. User roles. So a lot of times people want to know, what's the story about permissions? So no limits on the number of users for the report writer. You can have business users, employee users. So going through those different types of users, what permissions will I need? The interactive custom report writer has its own set of permissions. So you can have folks that have access to this and don't have access to other things. How are permissions handled for reports? So when you create or view the reports, the data is presented based on those object permissions the same way it is today with the custom report writer. And then specific report permission. So if I have a specific report, can I determine who has access to that report? And the answer is yes. You can control 2 individual folks. Next slide. And the comparison. So what's really the comparison between the custom report writer and the interactive report writer? So creating reports, as you've seen with the interactive, is different. It's quicker, and you're going to get more power, more advanced capabilities with the interactive report writer than you do with the custom report writer. Will you be able to take reports that you have today in the custom report writer and migrate those over into the interactive report writer? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, there is no migration. So if you created it in the custom report writer and you want to do that in the interactive, you would need to recreate that report. And therein lies why we say the custom report writer is going to stay in play for some foreseeable future. So we're not getting away from that. You'll still be able to use that tool and to access those reports. There's just not a path to convert because it's a whole different tool. Next slide. And then new features. So again, as Gary showed you, more ways for you to take those columns and have advanced calculations, to be able to have different functions and formulas within those columns. Is there a list of all the system fields and the field names for the report writer? As Gary showed you, and think about the custom report writer. If you use that one today, you know it's a wizard. And over on the left-hand side, you have those data libraries. We've done basically the same thing here in the interactive custom report writer. So we've put together what we call reporting areas, and you can search those reporting areas, which will help you get acclimated to them faster. So we've put those together. We've logically put them together, and there's many of them already out there. You saw how we showed you a pivot table report, and also you showed Gary showed you how he created a report and then added the pivot table to it. And then, will I be able to show periods and columns based on a transaction date? And the answer is yes. And if you remember that pivot table that he showed you where we had the year, and then we went to the quarter, and then from the quarter to the individual date. And then you can drill down into that transaction. Next screen. And then just several can I's. So can you add it to a report? The answer is yes. Then memorize. So Gary showed you how you could add it to a dashboard. You could memorize it. Can you schedule it and email it? Absolutely. Can you export it to Microsoft Excel and some other formats that he also mentioned? Formulas and calculations included when you export it to Excel. That is not something that is being managed today. And then, will I be able to include custom fields? So you know that within Sage Intacct, you can add up to 25 custom fields per object, and the answer is yes. So just the same way today in the custom report writer, when you add those custom fields, you have access to them in the custom report writer. You also will have access to those in the interactive custom report writer. Okay. All right, so I think we are ready, Chris, to take a few questions. We're approaching about 7 minutes till the top of the hour, but are there questions that have come through that we can answer?
Yes, there are. We've got a couple. Phil, I just want to address yours. How much will the new report writer cost? I have sent you an email, so please do check that out. Let's start here with Melissa Morell. Will they be showing GL activities into the group? Sorry, will they be showing GL activities into the report using dimension groups So far, this is pulling AP vendor detail. I'm hoping they will show GL details as an example. Oh, is that something we could target right now, or,
So Gary,
or is that?
yes. Yeah. So Gary, is that something that you can address?
Yeah, so today we're leveraging GL detail coming from that one that I built, that I was building from scratch, is pulling detail directly out of the GL transaction detail. We haven't added in that capability yet, but it's coming in a future release where we'll take advantage of those dimension groups that you've built into Intacct. So over here, that dimension group, when I pull out those individual dimensions, is not looking at the dimension group yet, but it will in a future release.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gary. Again, I have a question here from Navita. Can I select more than one table, the GL document detail and another table, and link them using a unique key?
Yeah, so the reporting areas are as defined today, you cannot change those. So we have purposely built reporting areas that cover lots of different tables within the system, and the logical link, like if it was, in my example, I was pulling data from the GL transaction table, and then I was also pulling data from the different dimensions. I could also then pull data from the customer, from the vendor, from the item. So each one of those I could pull data from, but we've logically built all those relationships and you can't change those. In a future release, we're going to give you that capability to add additional tables as part of that, where you can build some of those linkages, and that, that capability will be in a future release, but it's not there today.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to actually group these next ones together because they're all from the same person. Lista asks, oh, I just lost it. There it is. Can you export to PDF? What training is available? Can reports be graphed in dashboards? I think some of these might have been answered already, but that's fine. Can you print out lists of reporting areas? And finally, will data export to Excel as repeating reports, i.e. same report for each location on separate tab for each location?
Yeah, so PDF, yes. Can you export, can you add to dashboards? Yep, so like any other report today with the custom report writer financial, you can add to menus and dashboards. When you export to Excel, if you're wanting to pull the data out and have it usable in Excel, I always tell people, when I was creating my reports, there was on that heading, there was a checkbox that said suppress or not to, and you don't want to suppress the data. So when I was subtotaling, it suppresses the, whatever I'm subtotaling by, but if you drop it to Excel, you want that data in that column. So you would tell it not to suppress, but unlike the financial report writer where you check a box and you're creating a report group and it puts all that stuff on different tabs. Here, when you're building your reports, if you build them in the interactive report writer, and then you put them and you schedule them, I don't know if that, I'll have to go check to see if it knows if you put them on a report group, if it would break them apart into different tabs. I'm assuming it would if it allowed you to put them into report groups, but I'll verify.
So I would just jump in and say, Chris, and the question around training. So yes, there is training available through Intacct, through Sage Intacct, and there are also several recorded assets. So I would, if I were a customer, I would jump on the community and I would go look for the training courses for the interactive custom report writer. I would also tell you that we will have training classes available at Advantage in October. But in the interim, absolutely, if you want to get some training after you've gone ahead and subscribed to the tool, I would definitely get on the community and check that out. And as far as testing that report grouping, once that's been tested, I'll communicate that back to you, Chris, so that you can go right back to the person that asked the question with an update.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. And then I do have one last thing I do want to say. JMT also does training. So that is available to you as well. So just please indicate if you're requesting a proposal after this webinar, just please indicate how you'd like to move forward, and I'll make sure that everything is added to what you need, essentially. So we are about at 12 o'clock. Not about at 12 o'clock. We are at 12. So I want to thank everyone today for taking the time to join us and go through the interactive custom report writer. Thank you so much to Linda and Gary. That was fantastic. I think you guys did a hell of a job. We want to thank everybody here today. And I just want to remind you that, again, in the month of June, which is ending in a few days, there is an additional 20% off the interactive custom report writer. So if you are looking to add this to your subscription, I would suggest jumping on it now. And one more time, a huge round of applause to Linda and Gary. I know no one can hear that applause, but it's out there. So once again, thank you.
It was our pleasure.
So thanks again, everybody, and have a fantastic rest of your day. I was about to say have a great weekend, but unfortunately it's Wednesday. So again, everybody, really appreciate you taking the time, and we just want to thank you again and hope to bring more great content to you in the next few months with Sage Intacct. So thanks again, everybody. Sam, thank you for setting this up. And one more time, huge thank you to Linda and Gary. Thanks again.
Bye now.